So today we celebrate. It's something that we can celebrate every single day of our life, but today we're going to point out the resurrection of Christ and see how that relates to you. I have a lot of symbology that relates to the Bible, and I love that stuff. So I hope that you love it too. But anyway, the resurrection was not just a historical event. It was really a symbol of the resurrection that we go through every single day of our life. And it is about the dropping away of fear and judgment, sin and persecution, and even victimhood, and elevating our spirit, elevating who we are, our thinking basically, to understand who we truly are as a being of love. So this is a universal principle that is available to everyone. And we're going to explain the practicalities of it too, what the lessons are in the resurrection and how it relates to you. So as the story goes, and we're going to relate to the Bible in this because metaphysically we have it all comes back to the things that Jesus was teaching us. He came into this world as a teacher, a healer, and he maintained his stance of truth no matter what. This is the thing I appreciate Jesus the most is that he never deviated. There were other people like that too, that, Gandhi, for instance, never deviated from the truth as he understood it. So Jesus is representing a prototype to us. In other words, we have this prototype available within us that is always guiding us if we relate to it and help us to really connect to it. Um, Jesus is he was called the way shower, and the reason for that will become obvious because he showed us the way. So during this time when Jesus came into the world, it was a very dark time because fear ruled the day, and the authorities of that time considered his message of love very dangerous because it drew people away from traditional thinking. And much of the traditional thinking, as it even relates to today, is about sin or um, hate or vengeance or war, that kind of thing. So pretty much manipulative. And we've seen that a lot through religious practices over the many decades. So people, nevertheless, were looking to his messages, and he was building a following. And the Sanhedrin, who happened to be the ruling body of Jews during this time, or the ruling body of thought is what I should say, the ruling body of thought, were very wary of Jesus because as he built his following, there were people that were coming away from or walking away from traditional thinking, and that was dangerous for them. They were going to lose their following. The Sanhedrin represents the ruling body of thoughts, and that means for each person, what are your ruling body of thoughts? Are you coming from a place of love, forgiveness, and kindness? Are you coming from a place of anger, vengefulness, that sort of thinking, negativity? So we want to look at our ruling body of thoughts and how we approach the day. All you have to do that is pay attention to what you're thinking, and do you have judgmental thoughts? And if so, what would you like to do about those? So during this time, there was this fellow named Judas. Jesus considered him like his brother, basically, and Judas represents that part of us that's so naive that it sort of figures out the solution to the problem without even looking fully at the problem. So Judas thought he was doing a great thing. He was going to make an agreement with the Sanhedrin and point out Jesus, um, and then and then he would be able to collect some money for their treasury, and he knew that Jesus was so powerful that he would be able to get out of any circumstance that was presented to him. But of course, that was just looking at the world from his physical eyes and his senses rather than from his heart. Um, so it was a time where this transformation or this resurrection was time to happen. Jesus knew it. He felt this conclusion going on. So the story goes where he went to the Garden of Gethsemane. And by the way, the Garden of Gethsemane represents extraction. So that means that we're extracting the good, we're extracting the truth from that which is false. And that's what plays out during this garden. In the meantime, he took with him three people, three disciples, James, John, and Peter. And these are parts of you, by the way. They represent James as discrimination. And hopefully we always carry discrimination with us where we're looking at the situation and dissecting it and understanding what is true and what is not. James, and then John is love, and Peter is faith. So these are the three components or the qualities within ourselves that we bring to this time of resurrection. And so they had a hard time staying awake during this time in the garden. Jesus prayed all night, but the disciples kind of fell asleep. And he said, "Can you not stay with me for an hour?" But what was happening is I think that's part of us that just falls asleep because we know we're at a point where we're making a big change and it's just a lot to take in, a lot to process. So Jesus was there and he kissed Jesus on the cheek and said, and so he was making a point that this is the guy that you're looking for. The soldiers were there and they took him as captive. Um, Jesus was fully aware of all this, and he went with them without any resistance. He went along with them because he knew his time had come. And so he was taken before the Sanhedrin. I think of the Sanhedrin as kind of like in this physical form, as kind of like the Congress or something like that, where are the court. And they had already decided what they were going to do with him. They had a plan. And they did what often happens. They took his words and twisted them to make him look bad. And he knew what was going on. So he just went, as you say, whatever you want to say, that whatever you want to believe is up to you. And I think that is such a powerful thing because we are in situations very often where maybe we're accused of something or people look at us with a funny eyes and rather than fight it, it's better just to go, whatever you want to believe, because I'm no longer part of that. I can't be part of that. Um, and so that's what Jesus did. He kind of drew a fish on the sand in the on the dirt and he didn't participate. So after they did their thing and he did not resist, then they took him to Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate was very much in conflict because he could see this good man who went around healing people and doing good things, and now he's has to punish him. So he was very conflicted in himself. So but nevertheless, he had an assignment, so he took it, and he thought he had an out though because there was a law in the land that said once a year the people get to release one prisoner. They can choose which one. Well, what they did, and you have to remember that the people in this time period were also in a very dark state of mind. They've been trained with fear and things like that. So fear and judgment and criticism and all those things that keep us very low in our consciousness. So they chose Barabbas to release, and Barabbas was a known criminal. He was a murderer and he was an insurrectionist, and they chose him to release. So that gives you an idea of the state of consciousness of this world at that particular time. So in the meantime, then Jesus was to be condemned and he was to be crucified. On the way to the hill of Golgotha is what the hill is called, where the crosses were. Golgotha represents the mind, this intellectual mind. And that's the part of us that we're changing during this time, because when we go up to Golgotha, um, it will be a time when we're resurrecting from the heavy earth consciousness is what I call it, but it's the ego, and moving up into a state of higher consciousness of love. And Jesus is to be the instrument through all of this. But in the meantime, they took Simon the Cyrenian and to carry the cross. He was engaged in the service of carrying the cross. And Simon represents closed-mindedness, and he's holding on to fixed beliefs. And so we look at ourselves again and go, in what way are we fixing our beliefs on and not willing to change and not willing to see a bigger picture? And so that's again the indication of the time that we're dealing with here. But this is a time within us too. Everything is internalized here because everything that's going on in this picture, in this story, is about you. So in the meantime, the guards took Jesus's clothes and they cast lots for them, and they were basically having a good time. And the people there were a little upset with what was going on as far as what the guards were doing because they were so irreverent. And Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." I think this is such a powerful statement because we we deal with children, whether they're grown-up children or they're little children. We deal with people who don't see the truth, um, who act out and behave badly sometimes. And we have to recognize them as forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're children or they're wounded. And so I think that was one of the most powerful messages in this whole story and a way to live our life, as a matter of fact. But Jesus knew his time to depart this world was at hand. And one of the things he did was he prayed. And the prayer that he prayed was Psalms 22. You'll get the complete prayer if you go there. It's a very long prayer. But it starts out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This has been confusing to many people for many, many years because they think that Jesus was like disavowing God. But the truth of the matter is that he was saying, right this minute I feel forsaken, but it's not true. Uh, I am a worm, I am worthless, and et cetera, et cetera. And then he goes into this other part of the prayer where he says, "But you've always been with me, and you've always been my source of love. You've always been present in my life." So I think that gives you a guidance when you're in a tough situation where you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I've been abandoned." And yet it's like if we look back, we could see that God was present all the time, that no matter what was going on, we had this center within us that was love and kindness and guiding us through it. After that, he said, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." And with that statement, he implied supreme confidence in the universe and in the immortality of the soul. And it was done. So, as far as his physical life on earth, it was complete. He also said at another time that I will rebuild my temple in 3 days. And people thought that meant a building, but it really meant his body. The body is his temple. So his body was placed in the tomb, and 3 days later he came forth. But I want to mention about the tomb. The tomb, I think, is something that we want to acknowledge as a place within ourselves where we can be quiet and we can ponder and we can look at our situation and go, what's the truth here? And we can give ourselves some time in spirit to really move beyond the sense of angst and move into a place of knowing and understanding. So I value my tomb time every day because it gives me that chance to just process what's going on. And I'm hoping that you will have your own tomb time to do that as well. So in 3 days he came forth, um, and there was Mary, and Mary was the first one that saw him. It was really hard to recognize him because she wasn't expecting a form, a human form. But he had lost his clothes, so he had to go to the gardener's chap shack and get some clothes. So she wouldn't recognize him in that condition, but she did finally. And so I think about this as whenever sometimes we have these dreams where if we lost a loved one, we will have a dream where the loved one is there in the dream and they're saying, I'm good, I'm fine, you don't need to worry about me. And that's kind of the way it was for them, is that here I am, I'm still alive. And so of course the promise there is that even if the body dies, the soul is alive, that we never lose that. And so in that particular way, it's time to move on. But so I've heard that dream many, many, many times. So I know that it's something that when we need to have that reassurance, it shows up in a dream. So the resurrection principle is an ongoing law of the universe. Rather than a one-time miracle, we are always resurrecting ourselves, because when we look at a situation and go, I could have done better there, or I could have, next time it comes around, I'm going to operate from a place of love, or that my error was in that situation was to, and then this is what I'm going to do next. And so we're constantly resurrecting ourselves and moving into a higher place. It's called the Christ consciousness. And we're designed to work through these things so that we can live in a greater, higher energy of love. So Emerson said that the finite must put on the infinite. So again, that's a way of saying this. As we look at the outer world, the finite, we want to be able to convert it into the infinite and see with bigger eyes, with higher intelligence, and a higher understanding of love. That's what it's all about, is to come to a place of that we are always operating from our infinite and from our true self. So it's a universal principle. It's not a person. It's a universal principle. The Christ is within each person. And I think it's Emerson who said that the Christ consciousness is our greatest gift that has been given to us. Beyond the free will and just consciousness, it is the highest gift. I think that's a very powerful statement. So we're in charge of our own salvation. Jesus said, or I'm sorry, Ernest Holmes said that the ego pulls down and the Christ lifts up. So again, we know in whatever state we're in, whether we're operating from the ego or we're operating from the Christ. But our goal is always salvation, to move into a place where we are seeing the truth and recognizing that everything that happens is a way of supporting ourselves, being supported in love, so that we are being shown the higher road, the higher aspect of who we are. We are never deserted, never. That spirit is always present within us, and it will always manifest to anyone who partakes of it. Meaning, if you center your mind on that, you will recognize the presence of spirit. If you center your mind on it, if you do the work, if you meditate, if you study, if you convert your thinking into a higher level of understanding, you will always experience the divine nature that you are. So Holmes said that Easter is not a religious holiday, but it's a time of universal change. And so he said basically we die daily. We die to our lesser self and we move into our higher self, which I love that statement, but it's something that we have to agree to and be willing to operate from. And my notes are sticking together right now. Anyway, okay. So there's some lessons in this. I want to outline the lessons. The first lesson is that we transform daily. As we study and grow, we transform and we move into a higher consciousness daily. It's a choice that we make, and you can make that choice anytime you want. I always say, what's the good part here? What is this? What's the good that this is experience is leading me toward? And when I ask that question, I always get an answer. Sometimes what seems like very negative, or a really tough, challenging situation, and we realize that there's something in it that is helping us be a better person, or helping us learn a new skill, or helping us become stronger. There's lots of different ways that it can help transform us. The second one is there's no need to defend yourself, because when you defend yourself, you're guilty. That's what the Course in Miracles says. Why is that? Because when you defend yourself, you're living in that place of needing defense. And if you're innocent, you don't need defense. So there's a peacefulness that goes with not defending yourself, with accepting what is going on and just moving on yourself. Um, because no one can really harm you. You know, you're who you are. It cannot be harmed. The third thing is that bring faith, love, and discrimination with you no matter where you go. So part of our journey is to build our discrimination quality, to learn how to look at the good, the bad, and really work our way through it so that we understand what's going on. Love, of course, is love, and then faith is faith. So we're bringing those qualities with us wherever we go. And then the tomb. I think the tomb is a great lesson in that we can spend tomb time or just quiet time so we can connect with our inner self and really understand what this world is all about, what our lessons are, what our challenges are, and just process. We need that time to process. Many people don't do that, and I think it keeps them in angst much longer than they need to be. And then the next one is God is love. God never leaves you. God never turns away. God does not punish. It forgives. And forgive them for they know not what they do is the key statement there. And then the last one is there is no death. The body ceases to be because the body is only here as a temporary vehicle for us. The body ceases to be, but the soul goes on. And I think of it as like we completed one journey and then we prepare for the next. So the question really is are you ready to transcend? Are you ready to ascend to a higher energy frequency and a higher mental framework? Because this is the map. He gave us the map on how to do that. The resurrection happens within the mind. It is a mental resurrection. It doesn't even involve the body, really. It represents a transition from a mind pattern of limitation, fear, death, to a realization of oneness with the infinite, that we are always connected. We're never alone. So, your personal resurrection is a time for spiritual growth and progressive unfoldment. The dying off of old habits, the dying off of maybe judgment or criticism, negative habits, and the soul's resurrection as it expands in awareness. We always have that. Of course, we have that specifically here in this setting. Uh, so Jesus was the way shower, but it's up to us then to follow that and let it guide us. Let's see, the best is yet to come because as we're in this process, we get better and better and better. So the Easter message is to direct your own evolution by claiming your birthright of freedom, peace, and joy by recognizing the indwelling God, the indwelling Christ. And so that is what it's been about for me is that looking at this resurrection, like I look at many of the stories in the Bible and going, there's a deeper meaning here. And how can I make use of it in my life? And hopefully I've offered you a few ideas that might be helpful to you as well.